Ah, how I love that theme. Got totally used to it by being stubborn and training on the stage that goes with it all this time. Hey everyone, it's time for Mishmashing from the 2MK group. The content being broadcast on my channel now will be rebroadcast to the main 2MK channel with full permission, of course. Today we're looking at the Shoto matches out of those that I had during the last run, and we're looking to see what we can do to make that a bit better. This is important for everyone because these are the characters you're going to meet most often online, especially in the bronze and slightly higher than bronze tiers. So even the smallest bit of information about how to handle the opponent and the capabilities of Ansatsuken, known as Shotos in general, can help you at least avoid being frustrated, if not manage to get quite a lot of points on your way up. On the other hand, you should also note that because of that, the skill levels and approaches to playing these characters by various people online have a lot of variation. So the basic ideas you can use, you're looking to separate them into two types. Players who definitely know what they're doing, and players who are trying to learn the character or abuse a particular thing about the character. The latter are the ones that we're focused on being able to defeat and helping other people be able to defeat. So this Ryu is relatively high ranked, but don't necessarily have a lot of ways of approaching. This is because obviously Ryu's not doing so greatly these days in the tier lists, in the ability lists. He needs some help, but that said, there's a lot of things he can still do, especially at this level when not everyone knows exactly how to deal with everything. And the question is whether or not the opponent you're facing can bring that out. Interactions with Ryu in this game are mostly about figuring out when you can pressure him, especially at this level. He doesn't get anything off his throw, and he doesn't have a lot of spacings where he can do extra stuff. So, defeating a player who is playing Ryu comes quite heavily down to figuring out the player's tendencies rather than the character. For example, we see this player is willing to walk up and sweep. Presumably, let's hope, it's because I'm playing Colleen, and they think I'm going to attempt to counter on Wake Up. So far, they've been mostly right. That combo is definitely not practiced enough. I need to go up against the Cambot myself for a while. In any case, what you see here is the basic flow of a Ryu that knows how to keep you off of them long enough to build meter and frustrate you. It's actually a fairly good Ryu strategy when you're lower level to stay out of most people's way. Jump back when you can, get some extra space going, that sort of thing. The problem with this strategy is that it doesn't lead to a lot of learning interactions.
Final round.
For the Ryu player, that is. If you're focused correctly, you can learn a lot. Namely, where to stand, how much stress to put on them, how to be patient enough to attack, but not attack immediately. One of the easiest ways to get defeated by this sort of Ryu is attacking immediately or using just your basic conventional stuff based on how far away you are. There are good players to practice very slightly delaying things or doing things that are slightly outside of their range. And they don't force you to react a lot most of the time. You'll deal with Ryu like that in the higher silver ranks because most of the time that's where they've managed to get. But if you play as I did there, with a lot of movement forward, a lot of trying to chase them down when they're retreating, and not giving them a chance to show you what they're actually about, then given that he's such a versatile character overall, you can't do a lot to him. This is why you really need to understand how to make spacing matter the most for your character. If you ignore your spacing, as I am doing here blatantly, then the Ryu matchup becomes mostly just them doing a lot of damage. His damage was toned down, but not toned down enough to the point where you can just attack him relentlessly and expect it to work. And in the upcoming patch, which I presume may land somewhere around the 28th of May, presumably right before or right after Combo Breaker, knowing them right after Combo Breaker, you'll end up seeing Ryu a lot more effective in using his various dragon punches to keep your pressure off him even better than now. So what's the key? What is the way that you're supposed to play this match? Well, I'll show you what isn't supposed to happen. 1, don't jump. It's not that you should never jump, but Ryu is so good at keeping you from establishing a ground game where he has to care that it's very difficult. And a Ryu that runs away from you, which is what you will often find in the earlier levels of the game, is particularly good at this. So right now, for example, I should probably have waited there, but didn't. And I'm notorious for falling for that. And he always has that option. The thing about being too offensive against Ryu's, as you'll see, is that if you decide to jump, the chances that Ryu has randomly done an uppercut that you still get clipped by can be quite high. It may change a bit later on when the habits of them have changed back, but you can see it's pretty easy to cause this situation to happen. Because what am I going to do here? I'm going to throw out buttons to hit him after he's done something, and then I'm going to jump. The thing about Ryu players is that they'll often jump too, so you don't have to feel as if you don't know what to do at all. You can spend time even learning how to jump on Ryu where he can't do anything, and that can make a very large impact on your game. But in the end, you still have to be careful because of this. That crouching medium punch is so good at keeping you out of the space you want to be in that you're left with basically only 2 approach vectors from most characters. Either you jump, or you find a way to play footsies with your longest poking normal. The problem with Colleen is that she doesn't really have such a normal that won't also get clipped in some way before you get close enough. Her crouching medium kick is good for it, but she's not a very good matchup for Ryu in general because his zoning shuts down a lot of what she can actually do. Now personally I'm aware of this, which is why, as you saw, I used no vanity step, I used no space parabellum. Basically I went back to, this is how you would expect someone to play. They'll jump, they will attempt to get closer, and generally this doesn't work. The way to play against Ryu at this tier is get the life lead and see what they do. It's not necessarily that you should run away from them or try to play super patient or any of those things, but once you have the life lead and stop moving for a bit, you can get a good idea of what type of player they are by whether or not they try to come in eventually. Some Ryu are content to basically attempt to zone you the entire time.
Round 1. Fight!
You'll see this happen here as well in a wave. He's willing to throw out the uppercut at that range. And this started to get kind of weird, honestly, because he'll jump and use the spacing of the jump to move around. And even do stuff like that. Of course, that was a terrible idea regardless. There's no real reason for Colleen to pressure Ryu on wake up, especially not with that. When he has meter, you're literally wasting your time and opening yourself up to big damage. I think they didn't start this round at that moment. So what do you do here? That's not good either. This is why it is easy to progress in this game by just knowing setups for a while. Because if you know enough setups to do enough damage to fight this sort of player, it can easily seem as if you're doing really well, like that. But have you learned anything that you could take into any other match where
Final round.
you can actually be pushed out or have to worry about things on your way in, that sort of thing? In fact, the complaint of many higher level Ryu players is mostly that the risk reward for what you're doing here is fairly bad when it comes to Ryu's side. He has good damage, but he doesn't have enough ways out of setups that aren't fairly blatant. So, if I want to defeat the Ryu player, I should be going for more and more mix-ups and more setups, but I'm not trying to learn that here. I'm trying to learn ways to keep them in particular positions so that I can do things like that.
Colleen wins.
If your aim is to play to learn, which we will cover in the segment later this week, you should generally be aiming to lose to Ryu players. Or at least aiming to minimize the interactions you have with them in a match that lead to you doing big damage and them guessing. Because it won't help you get any better against anyone else. Now we're on to the second Ansatsuken user. Hi Ken. Ken's a lot more effervescent. Yes, that's the word I want. Ken will get in your face because he can do so. Now, since this player was actually in silver already, and because I figured I should give them more of a fight, I decided to play closer to my general skill level attempts, to put more effort into figuring them out, and maybe, if necessary, do more damage. So you're going to see a bit more here where I actually put effort into doing specific things to defeat them, rather than training a particular thing. But those of you who are familiar with Kenbot, even if the player is strong, the Kenbot is relatively useful because it causes you to respond to most of the same things. And it helps you to figure out how you should look at the patterns that an opponent is putting out. So the first thing I understood about this player is, if I push them to a certain range, they're going to sweep. Why do they sweep? They sweep because it's many people's panic buttons, but there's another good reason to do that. As I mentioned in the previous video, the sweep is the longest range low you can get. So if you expect B to move away from you, then sweep is the answer. You might also feel as if you're spaced such that I'm not going to expect it, I may not punish it properly. You might feel confident in it simply because you don't have enough life loss to care, that sort of thing. Because you'll notice that he doesn't just walk up and sweep in neutral. It's not that this player is randomly doing things. He sweeps there. He sweeps at what is basically maximum sweep range. And not a lot comes out of it from my end unless I'm super ready or playing a character who is good at punishing from extremely far away. This is also a good response to Colleen in general, because a lot of Colleen players will end up losing off of just roll because they're expecting some other hit, they're going for the counter. And here's the ending. So you'll notice that unlike against the Ryu, I didn't really go in that heavily. I let them dictate the pace of a lot more things. This is both a Ken thing and the fact that they were higher ranked. So what's the key here? Can you lure an opponent into doing something because you've learned the pattern? If you can, then you do much better than if you're just responding to everything they do. So this match goes on with a very similar vein. I know that this Ken player has the tendency to hit sweep at long ranges, and I can't really fault it because for some characters that is just a thing you can do. For Colleen you can do it, for Birdie you can do it. Ken, maybe not so much, but if there's nothing to teach you not to do it, then you might as well continue. Note again, sweep as a general thing is a bad tactic, and I'm sure most of us have gone through that phase of either hitting it or having people hit it for us, at us, men in the lower ranks. But that doesn't mean you should just stop using it because, oh, it's punishable. It's there for a reason, and you just have to get the reason right. So that's the goal. The goal is to hit them with that and then get them into the sweep. And go for the knockdown that comes from the V-skill. Now the specific reason why that's done that way and what's really important to make your own game better in terms of straight up winning is to recognize that when you do something like that, especially if the move you manage does some form of knockdown, you probably should immediately attempt to apply pressure, even to a character that has an EX uppercut. You can safe jump it, just go forward, make them think that you're going to keep on coming at them. Because if you give a person too much time to get back into a defensive rhythm, to realize that you are not going to push them, you're waiting for them to make mistakes, they start looking for their own mistakes. Don't have people waiting and looking for their own mistakes. Push them just enough to distract them momentarily from the fact that they keep on making it. And then you get the capacity to open them up in neutral by forcing the same mistake. So even here I'm pushing him out just to that range, and I could have gone for it again. I didn't fully trust it, but that was another option that I could use to deal with sweep, so I did. This can be a relatively difficult concept to get used to because you have to be able to autopilot your offense to a point while keeping your mind on the flaw in their game that you intend to exploit once you get back to neutral. And if you look at it from your side, relatively skilled players will be doing the same thing to you a lot. And it doesn't even have to be that they intended to do it. It's just that you might have a really obvious flaw, or one that their character is particularly good at defeating and they can just react to whatever you do wrong. This is why getting rid of certain bad habits is really important. Because if you can find what the bad habit is and recognize, oh, that's how I've taken damage in this round, you can pay more attention to it. You can also recognize that your opponent is probably looking for it and do something else, perhaps even something crazy that beats whatever they are waiting to use on you, I should say. So here we are back to Ryu. On the cusp of bronze, cusp of super bronze.
Round one. Fight.
So, what makes this a correct way to deal with Ryu? You can let him recover from things. Ryu's neutral is... You have to basically know whether or not Ryu's neutral is better than your character's neutral or not. And therefore whether or not you get to do more damage in neutral or not. If you can do more damage than Ryu in neutral or open him up easily, then stay in neutral, even after knockdown. Or you can do stuff like that, which throws off a lot of people. If your character is rushed down to the core and is basically only good at dealing massive damage and getting away with it when the opponent guesses wrong, then Ryu as the jack of all trades will suffer from your damage, but won't necessarily suffer from things you are trying to do. You can't be in a situation where you aren't putting Ryu under pressure or when your neutral is just moving back and forth. However, for Colleen players specifically, this isn't really calculable. You can't say that Ryu has worse or better neutral than Colleen. The two of them just don't interact in neutral much at all. Ryu can throw Hadoukens at her, and she can move back and do some zoning stuff. But a lot of it has to do with execution and very specific interactions and spacing that aren't really that easy for most people to grasp at the beginning. The only thing I couldn't say for sure is that it's better to leave Ryu on the ground. Just don't push him, just leave him there. Because the way that Colleen's pressure is applied generally doesn't apply to a character who has an invincible uppercut. She has nothing in particular, other than obviously her regular throw, that will make you go, oh, I should worry about doing this uppercut right here. And the regular throw is also not a reason for this. So unless you are going to attempt to bait him by doing walk-up, delayed, crouching medium or something, you're not going to get very far. And Ryu has lots of options. So, if you knock him down, just leave him there. That, for example, was both an execution failure and a bad idea to follow up after it. And once again, could have just left him there. This is generally what happens if you don't leave him there.
You win.
But because Ryu has so few direct ways of dealing with Colleen outright, once, as mentioned before, the risk-reward of getting in on him is mostly in your favor with almost every character at the moment. Except Fang, who outzones him so much better that it doesn't come up. Ryu players, as a general rule, should focus on their defense, but more unconventional methods of defense. Parry gives them a lot of room. And EX Shoryuken and other Shoryukens cover the rest of the space. There are a lot of spacings where if you try to crush counter him with your character, it's too blatant, and even then you might get reversaled off, you might get Shoryuken, those sort of things. But I'm definitely aiming to fight him without certain tools. Because the easy way to deal with Ryu when he's doing this is for Colleen to just walk up and be killed. She is effectively invincible and therefore does not need to fear Shoryuken if the opponent has not caught on to her doing that. So I'm leaving lots of stuff on the ground here because I don't have any reason to believe that this person can punish my V-skill yet. So there's that reaction. And this is the next reaction that you can have. That was a drop, but you get the idea. And once again, Now, as for whether or not you can close it out, then your execution and your amount of the damage you can do, your strength stat, so to speak, starts to matter. And it can be very frustrating to feel as if the reason you can't beat a Ryu player is because you don't have good enough combos, or you didn't manage to open them up enough. And when you get frustrated, you push in on them more, but that's mainly what they want you to do. So once again, I probably shouldn't have done anything there, or should have dropped an ice ball on his head. The neutral jump was a good decision, if it was in fact a full decision. And the rest of this was just the situation going in the opposite direction. Despite all other flaws, Ryu is really good at dealing the jump-in damage. Because he has so many good ways of converting from so many good ranges, you must respect it. And if you are a Ryu player, that is one of the best things you can do for yourself. Learn how to convert off his jump-ins, because if you can manage to get people to worry about it enough and land one or two of them, especially in neutral jump situations, that is a lot of damage for you. So here we go again. So far I have no reason to believe that they will punish my defense, and I should have left him on the ground again. You get the idea. Now that was a very, what I will call a brilliant bronze decision. A brilliant bronze decision is when you know that your opponent, or believe that your opponent, will play in a particular way because that's how you've seen everyone else play. And it's not a bad decision, precisely because that is true. Now, it may not serve you too well when you go further into the ranks, but that moment, that Shoryuken, was a good idea because that's where we are in the ranks. There is definitely something to be said for not really trying that hard to fix every flaw. Fix the flaws that make you lose first, and get a couple more rank points, get up to someone who punishes your other flaws more, and continue on in that way. The reason why this is probably the better approach, and why mishmashing as a segment exists and works like that, is to help you figure out which habit you have that is the biggest flaw in any given matchup or game. Even stuff you might not be seeing. The entire purpose being that if you cannot see one flaw because you're simply interacting too often, it's really easy to become discouraged. So here we have the opposite. Moving forward and beginning to use the ice block, drop it on the Ryu player's head. Space stuff correctly, just chill and play neutral, those sort of things. It's not necessarily working out a ton better, but that's the point. You have to understand that it won't always work out directly a lot better. But your aim is to learn what exactly changes in one direction or the other. So by using this tool a lot more, and the fact that Ryu basically has very few direct responses to it, I mean, he can parry on the wake up, but if he does that too much, you'll be able to figure him out. But as you can see, there's a lot that changes in this matchup. Even if the Ryu is actually aggressive, you can move out of the way, you can get into the right position, you can force them to play the game you want them to play. And you can even do the things that I was mentioning about learning where to jump, where Ryu's Shoryuken would actually have at least a tiny chance of whiffing. Just regular anti-airs might whiff. those sort of things. That said, there's still a lot to be said for just walk up and sweep on Colleen. Some good mix-up singer. And I'm still feeling that cancel. So they've got a lot of mobility now, and they're starting to adapt to the throwing of the ice ball. But the adaptation is relatively predictable. And the same sort of thing happens with your own characters, I'm sure. So we leave him on the ground again. Why? Because we have the life lead now, even if only by a little bit. Life lead continued. And notice, again, as soon as I try to hit him, after knocking him down, he immediately responds. So generally, should I do this? No, probably not. But note the spacing, and I could have done it again. Now the reason for those, and that was where it all went wrong, but the reason for those was to give the impression that there's not going to be an anti-air every time. And of course, unfortunately, it caused me to actually not anti-air that time and nearly lose. But this is an advanced technique, and the only good reason to do it is if you are pretty sure that the only way you've gotten damage off the opponent so far is by punishing one mistake. Most opponents in bronze will definitely realize I'm making this mistake, as mentioned before, and stop doing that. And once they've stopped doing that, you're back to where you started. You can't necessarily get anything off them. However, if you have a move or a movement option that allows you to get out of the way of the attack without actually responding to the attack, psychologically it has a stronger effect. An opponent isn't necessarily likely to stop doing something because you've managed to dodge it. And you can use that to spend some time building meter, spend some time getting them to use meter, get a better feel of the match or the person in general. And then, if you trust your own reactions enough, bust out the counter move. This is especially important in earlier parts of the match where you don't want to give them V-trigger very quickly.
Round one.
Since often V-trigger changes the flow of the match itself and can cause you to have to adapt to something entirely new for a while. Ryu, fortunately, isn't mostly like this, but there are even some bronze Ryu that recognize that the use of his V-trigger is not really about throwing more Hadoukens. Depends on who they're playing against. So once again, I'm not really trying to do this as much as I feel like I should be because they're so close to stun. So I'm going to try to bait one more and get it. The reason for that in that moment was that was going to give me the round. Now, if you're thinking at the high level of play, they're not going to fall for that anymore because now it's stuck in their mind, I did this thing and I died. And that is a very strong demotivator for most players. So now that I know that, I have to get the life lead a different way, push them back and so on. Get their mind off it completely so that they'll jump, but they're not necessarily going to jump again. Concepts like download complete are not just for high level players. It's a matter of what you download. That was well played on their part, but I managed to get them to get back to the jump, and therefore.
Colleen wins.
So, whether you're watching this from the side of the Shoto army, or watching this from the side of whoever else decides to go up against them, you can see what you're supposed to take away from this. Your opponents are, in both cases, going to be looking for their own flaws, because part of playing these sort of characters where you must play solid, you must play clean, you must understand certain things, leads directly to that particular style of play. You have enough time to look at what you did wrong, and you have enough other options to try something else. I was noting that I really like this costume in green. Specifically in green. I checked all the other colors. I don't like any of the other colors, but it looks great in green. So the force has arrived, and I got totally caught up on the greenness and mixed up my Star Wars and Green Lantern references into one thing, and it got stupid. So what do we know about this player? Obviously nothing. How can we most quickly learn something about them?
Fight.
Jump at them from that range. If they don't uppercut or randomly hit an anti-air, they have enough awareness or they're not good at doing it. And you can test the latter later in similar ways. But that was the first thing I realized. Okay, that's definitely not what I expect. They are super aware of their jump-in ranges. And I'm not really used to Ryus that are. So this got really hairy really fast. This person has clearly trained their anti-air skills heavily. But of course I had to put that to as much of a test as possible, because how else would I learn anything? Or be able to show anything? So first we make them realize, if I do jump in on you, it's going to hurt. Now what? Apparently, anti-air jab. But I'm not worried yet, because Colleen doesn't necessarily deal with that differently than other characters, and if you hit the button the correct timing, the anti-air jab can fail. So I have an option on them still. But obviously you'll note that I jump a lot less, and I jump at different timings so that I can set up this sort of thing. I probably should have gone straight for that right away, but... And once again, do the counter because, well, it's better than losing the round and was going to kill anyway. So now I'm back to neutral. We both have about the same amount of meter, so I'm working out what do I do here. Their reaction to dashes is apparently nothing. So again, remind them, if you let me jump, I'm going to hurt you. And once again, we see the anti-air jab. That's on me for not doing the actual motion well enough, and they answer back with a lot of damage. And some combos I have literally not even seen. So at this point I'm thinking, okay, I have very little chance of winning this, so let's do another test. So good games to the force. This is a perfectly acceptable way to get to silver rank and stay there. Learn some anti-airs and learn to do a ton of damage, and you will be fine for the most part. The problem will come when you reach a little bit higher, where people don't jump or recognize that they have to mix up their jump game, and their defense is better or their offense is less crazy, so they don't get splattered when you do things. So, having noted, alright, this is not just a silver player who happens to be there because they were doing random things. It's relatively difficult for most Ryu to do this, in fact, I will note. Some of them can do it by running away and zoning, but if you don't see that, then be prepared for a fairly tough fight. It can get intense, even if only because if a Ryu player has mastered their outputs, you don't get to just run the game back. If you're lucky, you won't get stunned. So now, knowing that this player is ready to anti-air and very strong damage, we're looking at playing footsie and seeing what they will use if I jump at different ranges. Apparently the anti-air jab still works fine, so as does that. another brilliant anti-air option for Ryu in general. So this got bad, and their pressure was okay, so I decided this is probably time to actually do something else. And even that didn't work out well, because even with altered jump timings, they still managed quite well. So we're turning up the heat now, basically. And cause the Shoryuken to whiff, therefore drop the combo, use the spacing trap, throw this out, and wait. That was a terrible decision, but I got away with it. That one was not. That was intentional. That I didn't expect to work, but so be it. You can see that I'm applying the spacing for the V skill that is used against Ken. You can use this on many characters, in fact. Cammy can do it, Bison can do it, although Bison is more about them expecting them to try to play footsies with you. Mika can do it, but not necessarily when Ryu has a lot of meter, etc. So we see the empty jump, so they've also adapted really quickly to that. We see the parry being used because presumably they've figured out that they can't just anti-air jab everything because I'm ready for it. But I need another round here, so... have to finish them off quickly. For all Ryu players, and definitely all Akuma players, please note you will never get away with that. Unless your fireball is going to kill, do not throw it when I'm standing in that position and have V-trigger. All Colleen players should be aiming to learn that as a tactic in general. The good thing you can do as a counter to that is just use your jumping heavy kick, because you will get over before she recovers and then get a massive punish combo, which is good. So now we're at the point where this opponent should be making adaptations. That's the main thing that silver and higher players are able to do better than bronze players, and what our bots and our streams are aiming to teach bronze players how to do. It's not enough to adapt by saying, wow, that was a bad idea, I should stop doing it. Because it is quite possible to get away with bad ideas, and spending too much time thinking about it isn't really helpful. A single bad decision doesn't really mean you should be putting a lot of effort into feeling bad about it. Leave that for the pros for now. It's when you consistently make the same bad decision without realizing you're doing it, or with expectations that it will work better this time. So you'll know what they move into their game here, besides obviously the massive damage. Note that they're starting to do solar plexus strike. And this is important for nearly everyone to recognize. Almost every character has some forward moving normally that will get them under or closer to certain forms of jump in. And you can use this normal almost automatically when faced with an opponent who likes to try to space themselves to jump and bait Shoryuken. Fortunately, Ryu's walk speed really does lead into that quite well. And they just pushed out a ton of damage. And did the proper quick rise from there. And once again, did well because anti-air jab is good against Colleen. I'm pretty sure it's good against all of her buttons rather than just the heavy kick. But I didn't actually spend a lot of time testing that, because I know I can just test that at my leisure. So why did they win? Anti-airs. Anti-airs followed by movement on the ground, and my unwillingness, generally expecting to be tricked or thrown, my unwillingness to use the counter at that moment. Plus, Ryu has a lot of options given that he can go for the low and still get the combo. It would have been better to simply not jump anymore at all. We're on to the third Ansatsuken user and the current master of the fist. Now, interestingly, I have not seen as many Akuma lately. People are quite fond of the character, as I'm sure all of you know by now. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to see a lot of them in the bronze tier, more so because the sort of player who plays Akuma has probably just been waiting for Akuma to come out and is sailing on up through the ranks using various mix-ups and so on. The best you can do against most Akuma is learn really good defense. And this match should illustrate why that specifically is required. However, note that Akuma can still be played in that zoning way, even though his regular fireball does not cross the entire screen. The reason for this is because the Shakunetsu Hadouken, the red fireball, is still available to him from there. And if he's determined to zone you, then this is an option. Plus, it's not as if that doesn't reach quite far. So you see zoning as a perfectly possible option, and as much as Colleen is able to go through the fireballs, Akuma is blessed with normals that are able to link and lead into things easily from neutral if he has managed to somehow trick or trap you. So we'll note that overall this Akuma has gone into a very similar defensive style. We won't call it zoning outright. And their options are still open. That's the sort of move I referred to though. Any advance can be easily stopped by Akuma's standing medium kick, and it will lead into something. It may not look as powerful. It looks basically like Colleen's or Lara's, but it's definitely better in many ways. And his ability to change his jump arc in multiple ways means you can't necessarily count on being able to just anti-air him. So you have to be a lot more careful. This is the strength of Akuma relative to the others. It's not specifically that he hits harder, but that his offensive options are better. And therefore, it's much easier to mix up or push the way through the lower ranks for an Akuma player because you have to worry about exactly what to hit or do, and things like this happen. Your defense can be good relative to 10 or going up against Ryu's basic pressure, but with Akuma you have to know when to get out of the way a lot more often. One of the focuses of Akuma Bot when it is made will in fact be the Demon Flip and its resultant mix-ups, as well as the standing medium kick in very specific situations. Fortunately, for anyone who wants to make a try at making their own Akuma Bot, I'll give a little primer as to how that sort of thing is done. It's a basic principle of bots that just requires a little execution skills. But here we're looking at the fact that Akuma's one weakness against Colleen is difficult to exploit against a person who is not feeling confident already. Basically that he can only keep pressure on her from close after she blocks by hitting more buttons. And if you can predict which button, then obviously your situation has gone from bad to severe damage. That came down close and I probably should have expected the Goshoryu.
Akuma wins.
But in order to defeat an Akuma with basically any character, what you're looking for is the moment at which he has pushed you out of his block string, because there are very few proper things that Akuma can do from there. He should normally cancel into a Hadouken, but this can leave him fairly open against a lot of people. Or at least dealing with the idea that they are going to get away because now he's pushed them too far away for any further mix-up. the thing you want to do most against Akuma in this game at the lower levels is block. And when you've recognized that he's right in your face, be ready to V-reversal. Even if your V-trigger is really good, your aim should generally be to V-reversal. Because V-reversal gives you at least one thing. You have to actually get hit. It allows the Akuma player to stay in the mindset that they are able to pressure you safely, and then you can use that to, if you have an EX reversal of your own, throw it out at a critical moment. You can attempt to neutral jump if they realize you block a lot and start to throw you, but usually you should guess that as early as possible. That sort of thing. Because if you move, then jumping becomes a mix-up for Akuma. If you try to do a move, Demon Flip becomes a mix-up for Akuma. You can see it basically happen here. There's a lot of stuff that Akuma can endanger himself by doing when you have let him get out of that range. But to stop him before that is actually harder than stopping Kami, because at least Kami must approach in a very specific way. Akuma is not really required to do this. So no meter usage, no serious attempts to use her setups or mix-ups. We're waiting this person out, basically. But it is the ability to do that and your own ability to get away from that that decides a lot of this match. That was another brilliant bronze decision. Completely. And that on my part was a terrible one. So we're gonna call that a perfect, but watch the interactions that happen. In fact, this time I'm gonna go back to it.
Round 2.
It's very important that one recognizes the interactions that happen and what decisions could have been made better, if any. Of those things, there was no specific point at which I could have made a better decision. But after a sequence of them, I made one bad decision and then didn't have the right makeup. This is what rushdown characters do, and staying calm in the face of it is hard for most about anyone. So now we're starting with a different concept of this match. I'm going to try now to keep him in a spot where I can control him. But once again, you'll note that the player makes very good use of their approach options, and from them gets quite a lot. That was a good decision on their part. Colleen Shimmy is weak. But once again, a brilliant bronze decision. The usual reaction someone can have to that is, why would you super right there? I could have just blocked it and killed you. But if they're used to it working, then it works. And even a high-level player can be caught by that, because that's where that complaint comes from. The feeling that the game is random because that happened, and you feel as if that shouldn't have happened. There is no shouldn't have happened in those situations. But let's review these matches again with the concept of trying to work out how the overall framework of the Akuma bot should work. Because if there are things that are difficult to make good decisions against, then the only thing you can train is reactions or spacing yourself. In fact, It's generally not a good approach to try to use bots, the CPU, or even opponents to learn this sort of thing. That's what makes Akuma such a devastating character. For the most part, there is no learning. Even if you could learn it, what you learn against one opponent backfires against another. And as frustrating as this is, you must deal with the situation by looking at the spacing to avoid ever being in those situations. And that, therefore, is the only useful Akuma bot one can make. You have to get used to the idea that you have to dodge Akuma and find the buttons and normals that allow you to do that. So obviously we must give the Akuma bot some chance to zone. The ability to throw the Shakunetsu Hadouken. But it doesn't need to be a focus, because while Akuma could beat you that way, that's not the decision point here. Nor does he particularly need to dash throw. He has better mix-ups than simply dash and throw you. So maybe you will find some Akumas that do it. But you should have trained reactions to that sort of player from somewhere else. So what we want to look for is something like that. He basically went from standing medium kick into doing a large amount of damage. And his V skill doesn't take up that much in terms of being useful in a bot. So we have to be relatively sure of what he's really trying to do. But the Demon Flip does. The Demon Flip does a good job of replacing the type of mobility form V skill that many of the other characters in other bots have been using. And because it has multiple enders, that should probably be the focus. The principle used for this type of bot, therefore, is to make it such that the move ends, rather than the recording ends before the move goes into its mix-up options. If you time this right, then you can make it such that the beginning of a different action triggers the move you want. So if the Demon Flip into throw is a requirement, then you have to have another action that purely starts with throw directly. You have other options if you have ways of delaying it that all match up frame-wise, but that's a relatively complex version of the bot, and you should look to someone who is very good at frame data, or wait for the Akuma bot that you provide to figure out how to do that sort of thing. Basically what you're aiming to do is to find the best way to put together that sort of mix-up. He wants to do something from this. If the something is also something that you can use on the ground, and it be useful, then great. Throw is a good option, punch is obviously a good option, and medium kick is most likely also a good option. So one action is probably Demon Flip. You can hide something in the very beginning of it, let's say. I don't think that immediately causes him to act or attempt to. And you can maybe even throw the Hadouken in there if you're good at that sort of motion. Because it is basically the same motion once. Well, no, it isn't. If you're not familiar enough, take a look at Akuma's moveset yourself. But the basic idea is, give him one action where he has a blatant jump, because you do have to learn to deal with those. One action where he does a Hadouken. because the delay on the punch for the demon flip output can work either way, basically. One throw, one medium kick, preferably into something dangerous, and the demon flip itself. And at that point, you will have probably the skeletal framework of an Akuma bot. He will do demon flip into things, he will jump and attempt to do things, he will jump and sometimes use air fireball, and from there it's just a question of what do you hide in things to make him more effective. We're looking at that here. What random buttons make Akuma effective that can be hidden well in other things? Well, we know that his light Kickatsu is very good for many things, and you're going to have to learn to deal with it and learn how and when to punish and not punish it. It's generally good practice to hide a V-trigger activation in there somewhere, although the bot itself might not actually be given full V-meter to constantly be in that state. That move probably doesn't need to be in. Mostly because you probably have to worry about that when Akuma has either already done a combo that is finishing it with it, or on wake up where you just guessed wrong. So presumably you will have gone through both Kenbot and Ryubot before getting here, and there's no real need to make him do ES uppercut unless you just feel like making yourself miserable. However, it can be hidden in the beginning of certain things to make sure that it comes out occasionally. It'll also help to make this happen. But there we see something else that could be hidden in quite well. That leaping downward strike is a good thing to have as a general thing, and easy to hide. It's a single input, it doesn't require too much complication, and it's a long input in itself, which means that when it does work, it will allow whatever comes right after it to also be hidden. Very important for bots. In fact, when the website is available, you'll be able to see the specifics of high-level bot design in those particular ways. You can also put in the jab because the jab will combo off that and save you some trouble.
Akuma wins.
But 2 matches against some Akuma are really not enough to give you an idea of what you'll deal with. For this, you need to go higher. And for that, we have to go to CFN.
Replay search.
For those of you who are not completely familiar, this should take us to matches of Tokido. If you're not familiar with Tokido, he's an extremely high level Akuma player. Now what you're looking for in terms of bot creation at this point is setups, and this relates back to habits. Let's see if we can find him in the rankings instead. This is a generally good way to deal with filling in parts of bots when you're not that assured of any specific thing. Oh, I left out the underscores. Still need to search the same way though.
Replay search. Why
does this work? This works because players now having this replay feature and it being as powerful as it is, will use it to get to high level matches of their own character. Even through the ranking system alone, it's possible, as you can see. And then decide, well, this is how I'm going to get my setups. And therefore it becomes possible to get a lot of ideas for what other players have gone to find to use against you. Seems that Tokido has been fighting against YHC Mochi for quite a while. Oh, we have some Ken matches here. That is probably something that should be looked into at some point. But in this case, the only reason I was avoiding the Dalsim matches is because it's much more likely that we'd spend a lot of time trying to find where in those Dalsim matches he actually used the setups. Ooh, 4 Ibuki matches, 5 Ibuki. I'm not going to ask what was happening that day, but we are going to look at them. Shoutouts to Tokido, of course, for just being the best, and in some way to Capcom for making these available to us all, even though it does feel kind of weird to just be able to go look at other people's matches randomly online. Still, this is open information, this is how we all get better, and it's a bit to your detriment to not use it if it's available, so what we are looking for here is Tokido's habits. And from Tokido's habits, we will see if there's anything we can come up with to tweak just the concept of the bot. I'm not going to go into specifics of it. The question, therefore, should we make the bot dance around a bit? Probably not, because it would be easy to just jump in on it. There we see something that could be useful. There is a specific range at which you can do a block string that ends in crouching medium kick. And it's useful because it's not that difficult for a bronze player to pick up that block string. The difference being that Tokido knows exactly why he's using it, when he's using it, and how to follow it. Whereas the lower level player doesn't necessarily know it, and they may just repeat it because they've seen it used. However, it's obviously strong. If it was not strong, we probably would not see Tokido using it.
Round 2.
And this means you have to come up with a way to deal with it. It won't let you beat Tokido because he will realize that you have the answer. But it may help you beat someone else. Someone who is not as familiar with why these things are done. You'll note that, for example, right there, he actually didn't finish it, he delayed it slightly. I don't think we're going to be able to get the bots to do that, but it is useful to realize that there must be a reason that he delays it. And that gives us a large concept of how to do this. If there is some reason, then that means there's a hole. And if there's a hole, you can learn how to exploit the hole. And our goal, therefore, is to make the bot do the same thing, but obviously since it is a bot and cannot mimic Tokido and make the decision of when to use it, it will make mistakes based on range or something similar. And you can then learn, is this punishable? Is this something that I can take advantage of? And how to do that. So maybe there's somewhere we can sneak in crouching medium punch twice into crouching medium kick. There are a fair amount of inputs that you can hide that sort of thing in, possibly even in particular startups for things. Now, watching matches that higher level players lose is oddly one of the best ways to up your game directly. Because when a top player loses, it isn't always because they got outplayed, and it isn't usually because one of their bad habits kicked in. It usually happens because the opponent, who up until that point had not been spacing themselves to defeat a certain thing, adapts suddenly. And they make the counter adaptation and win later, but you get to see something. Or sometimes it's just a random blow up. But we'll see what happens this time. Random blow ups don't tend to end in double loss rounds. So if I were to guess, I would say that the reason for this is that this player has learned Tokido throws fireballs approximately here. And if I were in that player's place, I would generally right now be thinking, you know what? I'm just going to keep on trying to beat the fireball. Once I've done that, I can take some damage off it.
Round 2. Fight.
Now fortunately for us, our bot is probably also just going to throw Hadouken whenever, and you can learn similar things. But it raises the question of if we should have it try to throw more Hadouken so that you can learn it. It could be that throwing Hadoukens at the right range is a really good approach for Akuma, and it therefore would be good for you to learn how to deal with them at particular ranges. But you can instantly see what the adaptation was. For various reasons, Tokido is throwing fireballs regardless, and this player got completely focused on dealing with that, and was able to take a round. In this case, 2 rounds. So the second thought for this is, how many Hadoukens can we hide? Because the good thing about hiding inputs is that it generally causes the bot to do things on wake up and after being hit, but not necessarily knocked down. And a Hadouken is a good thing to have in that space because it is somewhat unexpected, comes out slow enough that you could counter hit it if you dropped your own combo, but is likely to hit you if you hit the wrong combo altogether. So it's neither making the bot too weak nor too strong. It's just you having to deal with more things that appear random. And if it's hidden, it's more or less going to only come to you on wake up or on the landing of a different move that whiffs entirely. Chances are the positioning is going to be good, unlike say a Ryubot whose job is to do a sequence of buttons and zones. So the counter adaptation from Tokido, note I haven't watched these matches before. The counter adaptation from Tokido should be, okay, I need to stop throwing fireballs like that because that's what they're going to do repeatedly. He can't necessarily decide to throw the red one either because the way they've been dealing with the fireballs implies that that would be a worse idea. So now he started to throw them from further away, but he hasn't stopped throwing them. This is a master level adaptation, and you probably shouldn't think too hard about why it happens. The idea overall though is, I'm going to make you think I haven't adapted completely by doing the same thing, but from a distance where it probably won't work. So now he's waiting and throwing them from further. The result? Disruption.
Round 2. Fight.
Sometimes it's good to just be able to turn your bad habits into a slightly variant bad habit. If you can't stop yourself from doing it altogether, just do it differently. Unfortunately, Akuma is squishy, and this situation didn't necessarily get better. For those of you who are Ibuki players, or again, Shoto players, please note that her V-reversal will teleport her to you if she blocks and V-reversals a fireball. This can be very, very disorienting for the fireball throwing player, and can lead to a very quick death. But she normally does not recover as fast as you, unless you have thrown the fastest fireball you have, which crosses the screen quicker and therefore hits her earlier and lets her reversal earlier. Since she also has a couple of frames to change the reversal timing, I wouldn't suggest immediately doing something like throw or shoryuken, but just be aware that you could like hit crouching jab or something if this happens. Just a little random information to throw in there while we're finishing up bot concepts. So that interaction didn't really change much, and we didn't get too much out of it. That was basically strong damage on both sides and good neutral. It's very difficult to give a bot particularly good neutral. That is why it is so important to know which moves to hide to create the illusion of neutral instead of actual neutral play. You can only give a bot so much in terms of neutral because patterns become recognizable. If you want to create one that just walks forward different amounts, as was displayed before, that's for a different form of training, and probably there will be a bot that does that, but it's unlikely to be Akuma. So now we're up to an immediate rematch coming out of this, and presumably after the last bit of craziness, Takeda has decided, you know what, I'm just going to throw fireballs here. The reason this is important is because only two things that she does reach at that level. And he can just watch and see, okay, you don't have meter, so your second option is completely gone. And there's some damage. And pressure. And variation on the way in. We want to see very similar things. We may need to put in a shoryuken just for that. Hidden as well as possible. But never let anyone tell you that this is not a high damage character. It just takes a lot to bring out that high damage. So he stays completely quiet because there's no spacing to walk backwards. As you see, they did do the slide eventually. And that's not the range to throw the Hadouken. But we're back here. But the adaptation is still in effect. By sticking to their plan and using their meter to enact the plan, they were able to do something. Unfortunately, once again, it doesn't really give us anything specific to give to the bot. So, we're going to do at least one more and see what we get. Because it's not exactly easy to hide anything in a demon flip, and things like medium kick stuff, these are combo setups or crouching setups that are best left to actual inputs, both because of the requirement of them being at the very beginning, and often because unless you've really practiced the timing for a combo, which doesn't necessarily help when you don't necessarily know the character yourself, it's hard to hide them in things. So we're only really looking for one more input. The bot could do without it, and then that becomes an exercise to the viewer in coming up with whatever bothers them the most. But if we see anything particularly good that should be in the bot that is likely to be adopted by others, you definitely have to give it a chance. Because you're just going to end up stuck at whoever has mastered that one technique that isn't in the bot or has just been picked up somewhere and you don't know how to deal with it. Because you don't get that amount of time. But so far, it's not looking as if Tokido intends to use any new specific tactic. And that is the expected one. Might not even need to hide the light kick tactic because it would go right in from there. You'll note that it's more difficult to make bots for characters like this. Not because making the bot itself would end up specifically too weak, but rather that the problem in the Akuma matchup for most people is not that he is beating them out in a lot of situations that they aren't familiar with. It is that he made them guess wrong, and then he did a lot of damage. But it does bring up one thought. As opposed to the other bots who spend a decent amount of time moving around. Based on watching this sort of play, it could be said and thought that maybe the Akuma bot should spend a lot more time blocking. And down back is a fairly easy input to hide. Maybe even back for when he should be moving away from you at particular timings or after particular things. But some nice down back delays with jabs to pull out of it. This is where the overall aim of the bot has to come in. If the aim of the bot is to avoid his mix-ups and attempt to reposition yourself within spaces so that you can get points by responding to a mix-up, then the bot being stationary for a while isn't really a negative for it. It lets you get your points and not waste a lot of time trying to keep up with it or guess randomly, while still giving the bot good enough defense that you have to consider how to deal with it. But, fortunately for us, we get one more chance, in that here is an opponent who plays a command grab character. And this is important because then Akuma is not only forced to deal with mix-ups himself, but as a general rule, a command grab character player cares much less about standing defense. So it forces Tokido in this case to take a different approach to the match overall. Therefore, let's see if we get something other than that defense concept. And if not, well, that's probably what's going into the Akuma bot. We're still seeing a lot of fireballs. Zoning does work. Particularly because it's not truly zoning. It is throwing fireballs at a range where there's a possibility of them becoming knockdowns, and therefore an issue. It also tempts the opponent to come closer in, where they can get clipped by the medium kick. And what do we know so far? A really abstract concept actually that has just randomly popped up because of the dizzy. The Akuma bot probably needs at least light punch. Sorry, potentially medium because that might be what you're more used to in the upcoming patch. But overall, It's relatively hard to react to a light punch shorty. It doesn't have to worry about the priority system in the game, allowing you to trade with 3-frame normals and be put into positions where being plus, due to using particular block string, doesn't save you. So, perhaps Akuma can spend some time defending and then just randomly use a light Shoryuken stopping. Leaving the opponent, in this case the bot maker and the one who is using this, to figure out how to keep themselves from being in that situation while doing everything else and dealing with every other mix-up. Can we squish all that into the bot? We'll see. But again, this is concept to be made use of at your leisure. So reminding again, Demon Flip, ending at the point where you should probably hit a button to get one of the 3 potential inputs, or even possibly doing nothing, which is even more useful because it means that if he overlaps with the defense option, that he'll just do the regular low Demon Flip, get it, and allow you to get all 4 mix-ups into one thing. There is a throw followed by something. Presumably the light Shoryuken should not actually be hidden in the throw, but it's not a bad option. Probably a standing medium kick. Probably crouching medium punch into crouching medium kick. And some Hadoukens for good measure, as well as that move. So it's a lot to fit in, and probably shouldn't actually attempt to put all in. But it gives a good idea of what main line Akuma play that would be picked up by someone watching high-level Akuma players, for example, could be made up of. Well, Tokido hasn't been pulled into any command throw shenanigans, so it's definitely looking as though there's nothing specific new to pick up from this. You can imagine that for the most part, aside from like that, even if it doesn't do a bunch of good combos, the bot is going to manage to do most of what he's doing. However, we would consider that to be the inimitable Tokido.
Akuma wins.
Therefore, look out for streams on the creation of the Akuma bot in full. And if you've had inspiration to go make your own, see what you come up with and how it compares to ours. With that said, it's the end of mishmashing for tonight.